Everybody knows the buttermilk. Everybody knows the double dredge. These 35 tricks are the ones that never made it into any cookbook, the ones you only learn standing at the stove next to a woman who's been frying chicken since Eisenhower was president. Let's get into it, starting with number 35, chilling the mixing bowl and the flour itself in the freezer for 15 minutes before dredging even begins. Not the chicken this time. The bowl and the dry flour both set in the freezer for a quarter hour before a single piece touches either one. Grandma Delphine kept a specific metal bowl reserved just for this, since metal chills faster and holds cold longer than glass or plastic. Cold flour meeting room temperature wet marinade creates a bigger, more sudden temperature difference at the moment of contact, and that sharper contrast is part of what makes the coating set almost instantly rather than slowly soaking in, giving you a cleaner, less gummy first layer before the chicken ever sees oil. Number 34. Marinating each piece of chicken in its own individual sealed bag. Never one shared bowl. Not one big bowl or one big bag with everything piled together. Grandma Odetta portioned every single piece into its own small bag with its own share of marinade, sealed separately, laid flat in the fridge. When chicken pieces sit stacked in one shared container, the bottom pieces sit in concentrated marinade, while the top pieces barely touch liquid, so some parts come out overbrined and others underseasoned. Separate bags mean every single piece gets identical exposure, identical time, and identical results, with nothing left to chance based on where it happened to land in the bowl. Number 33. Laying every piece flat in a single layer during the marinade, never stacked on top of each other. A wide dish or two dishes if that's what it takes, but never a deep bowl where chicken piles up 3 pieces high. Grandma Cleotha would rather dirty 2 extra dishes than stack her chicken. Stacked pieces press against each other, blocking marinade from reaching the touching surfaces evenly, and the weight of pieces on top can actually squeeze liquid away from the pieces underneath. A single flat layer means gravity and time work the same way on every single piece, with nothing shielded or crushed by the meat sitting on top of it. Number 32. Weighing the chicken and calculating salt at exactly 2% of that weight. Not a handful, not a palmful. Grandma Wilhelmina weighed her chicken on an old kitchen scale and multiplied by 2% to get her exact salt amount every single time, down to the gram. 2% salt by weight is the threshold food scientists have identified where meat is seasoned deeply enough to taste well brined all the way through without crossing into oversalted. Below that number, the brine barely registers. Above it, you start losing moisture instead of retaining it. She never called it a percentage. She called it knowing her scale. Number 31. Preheating the empty cast iron skillet on the burner for 10 full minutes before any oil ever goes in. Dry, empty, just heat, timed with a clock, every single time. Grandma Odessa May wouldn't add a drop of oil until that skillet had 10 uninterrupted minutes on the burner first. Cast iron heats unevenly and slowly if oil goes in a rush, leaving hot spots and cool spots across the same pan. A long, slow, empty preheat lets the iron itself reach a uniform temperature all the way through before oil is added, which means every single piece of chicken that touches that pan gets the exact same heat, no matter where in the skillet it lands. Number 30. Fresh orange zest, about a teaspoon, worked directly into the dry seasoning blend, not juice, just the zest, finely grated, mixed straight into the same bowl as the paprika and garlic powder. Grandma Frederica kept a small zester specifically for this and nothing else in her kitchen drawer. Citrus zest carries aromatic oils that are completely different from citrus juice, delivering a bright, almost perfume-like top note without adding any of the acidity or extra moisture that juice would bring to the dry mix. It's a background brightness that most people who eat her chicken could never quite place, and she never once told them what it was. Number 29. Instant mashed potato flakes, about a half cup blended straight into the seasoned flour. The dried kind from a box, crushed slightly finer between the fingers, mixed evenly through the flour before a single piece of chicken touches it. Grandma Luvinia kept a box specifically in the pantry for this, never once served as actual mashed potatoes in her house. Dehydrated potato flakes absorb surface moisture aggressively and puff slightly in hot oil, creating an irregular, craggy texture with far more surface area than flour alone, similar in spirit to a tempura-style coating, but built from a pantry staple nobody would ever suspect. Number 28. Rendered chicken fat saved from a prior roast blended into the frying oil at about 1 part fat to 8 parts oil. Not lard, not Crisco. Chicken fat specifically, strained and stored from whenever a whole bird had been roasted earlier in the week. Grandma Ruthell kept a small jar in the freezer that never stayed empty for long. Frying chicken in oil that already carries the flavor of chicken fat reinforces the meat's own flavor rather than introducing a completely separate one, deepening the savoriness of the crust in a way neutral vegetable oil alone simply can't replicate, using a piece of last week's dinner to season this week's. Number 27. Resting the finished chicken on a cutting board tilted slightly at an angle, propped up on one edge. A thin wedge, sometimes just a folded dish towel. Under one end of the board so it sits at a gentle slope rather than perfectly flat. Grandma Josephine May set hers up the same way every single time without fail. Drippings and excess oil naturally run downhill and off the low edge instead of pooling directly underneath the resting chicken, which means the bottom surface of each piece stays drier and crisper during the rest instead of slowly reabsorbing the very oil that just came off it. Number 26. A pinch of coarse flaky sea salt pressed onto each piece the instant it comes out of the oil while it's still glistening. Not table salt, not seasoned salt. Large, coarse, flaky crystals pressed on by hand within seconds of the chicken leaving the grease. Grandma Vernella kept a small dish of it right next to the stove for exactly this final moment. The residual oil on the surface is what makes the crystals stick without dissolving in, so every few bites you hit an actual burst of salt crunch rather than a uniformly salty crust throughout. It's a finishing touch added after everything else is already done, purely for that final bite of texture. Number 25. A pinch of baking soda in the dry rub, 30 minutes before anything else touches the chicken. Not baking powder. Baking soda directly rubbed onto the raw skin, about a quarter teaspoon per pound, then left alone for 30 minutes before any brine or buttermilk goes on. Grandma Odell in Savannah did this before every single batch. Baking soda raises the pH right at the surface of the meat, which breaks down proteins faster than salt alone and lets the surface brown deeper and faster once it hits the oil. Chinese kitchens call this velveting. Grandma Odell called it getting a head start. Number 24. Frying every piece twice at 2 completely different temperatures. First pass at 300 degrees until the chicken is just cooked through but pale. Pull it out, let it rest 10 full minutes. Second pass at 375 degrees for 2 minutes just to finish the crust. Grandma Yvonne in Charleston ran her whole Sunday chicken this way, and everyone assumed the extra step was just her being particular. It's not fussiness. The first fry cooks the interior gently without overbrowning the crust. The second fry, at a much hotter temperature, shatters the coating in a way one long single fry never can. Korean fried chicken built an entire cuisine around this exact method. Number 23. 2 shallow cuts into the thickest part of every piece before it ever sees marinade. A paring knife, 2 quick slashes about a quarter-inch deep into the thickest part of the thigh or breast. Grandma Ophelia did this on autopilot, barely looking down. Those small cuts open channels for the brine to reach the center of the meat faster, and they also mean the inside finishes cooking at nearly the same rate as the outside, so you're not waiting on a thick center while the exterior overcooks. It's a 2-second cut that solves the single biggest reason home-fried chicken ends up dry near the bone. Number 22. A splash of club soda mixed into the egg wash, nothing else changed. About 2 tablespoons of plain club soda whisked into the egg and buttermilk right before dredging. Grandma Willette kept a bottle specifically for this, never for drinking. The carbonation creates thousands of tiny air pockets in the wet coating, and those pockets turn into crisp little air bubbles the moment the chicken hits hot oil, which makes the crust noticeably lighter and shatters differently than a flat, dense coating. It's the same principle tempura batter runs on, just applied to a Sunday dinner nobody in her family ever questioned. Number 21. Freezing the fully dredged chicken for exactly 10 minutes before it goes into the oil. Not the fridge. the freezer on a tray, uncovered, timed. Grandma Fannie Mae set a kitchen timer for this every single time. 10 minutes in the freezer sets the wet coating hard against the meat before the heat shock of the oil has a chance to loosen it. Go in too warm and soft and the coating slides. Go in cold and set and it locks on and stays there through the entire fry. 15 minutes and the exterior starts to actually freeze, which throws off your cook time, so she never went past 10. Number 20. Salting the chicken dry the night before, then rinsing that salt completely off before the buttermilk ever touches it. A generous dry salt rub into the fridge uncovered overnight, then in the morning, a quick rinse under cold water before patting dry and starting the buttermilk soak. Grandma Theola ran this two-stage system for decades. The dry salt does its tenderizing and moisture-pulling work overnight through pure osmosis. Rinsing it away before the second stage means the buttermilk isn't fighting against an already heavily salted surface, so the final chicken is deeply seasoned through the meat without tasting oversalted on the crust. Number 19. Crushed saltine crackers mixed directly into the seasoned flour, about a cup for every 3 cups of flour, not breadcrumbs. Saltines, crushed fine but not to powder, small uneven pieces still visible in the flour. Grandma Ruthie kept a rolling pin specifically for smashing crackers on Sunday mornings. The cracker pieces create an irregular, craggy texture that plain flour alone can't produce. Little ridges and shards that catch more oil and crisp harder than a smooth flour coating. It's a texture trick that predates the cornstarch and rice flour blends modern chefs are credited with inventing. Number 18. Dusting the raw chicken with plain flour before it ever touches the wet marinade. A light, even coat of dry flour on bare chicken, patted on and mostly shaken off, done before the buttermilk soak even starts. Grandma Louvenia called this the pre-dust. Wet marinade poured onto bare, slick skin tends to slide right off, especially near the joints. A thin layer of dry flour first gives the wet marinade something to actually grip, which means more of it stays on the chicken through the entire soak instead of pooling uselessly at the bottom of the bowl. Number 17. A tablespoon of chicken bouillon powder whisked straight into the dry seasoned flour, not into the marinade, into the flour itself, mixed evenly through before a single piece of chicken touches it. Grandma Coretta kept a can of bouillon powder next to her spice rack specifically for this. Bouillon is concentrated umami in powder form and mixed into the dry coating. It seasons the crust itself from the inside as it fries, rather than just sitting on the surface like salt does. It's a restaurant trick for boosting savoriness that has nothing to do with heat or spice and everything to do with depth. Number 16. The claw hand, flat hand dredging method. One hand permanently wet, one permanently dry. One hand only ever touches the wet marinade and lifts the chicken out. The other hand only ever touches the dry flour and coats it. Grandma Bernice was strict about this to the point of correcting grandchildren mid-dredge. Cross the hands, dip your flour hand into the wet mix even once, and you build up thick, gluey clumps on your fingers that end up as ugly, unevenly cooked lumps stuck to the random pieces of chicken. Keeping the hands separate the entire time is the difference between a clean, even coating and a streaky mess. Number 15. A final third, pass through plain, unseasoned flour, completely dry after the normal wet-dry dredge is finished. After the standard dip and coat, one more dry-only pass pressed on firmly with flat palms, no liquid involved at all. Grandma Josephine called this the shell coat. The extra dry layer, pressed rather than dipped, builds a noticeably thicker crust with more surface area for crunch, and because it's applied completely dry at the very end, it doesn't add any extra moisture that could turn gummy. It's the difference between a good crust and one that genuinely shatters when you bite into it. Number 14. Testing oil temperature with the handle of a wooden spoon instead of a thermometer. The wooden tip goes into the hot oil, and if a steady stream of small, consistent bubbles rises around the wood, the oil is ready. Grandma Alberta never owned a thermometer in her life and never once served undercooked or greasy chicken. Wood has microscopic pores, and oil hot enough to fry releases trapped air and moisture from those pores as a visible bubble stream. Weak or absent bubbles mean the oil isn't hot enough yet. It's a simple physical test that's more reliable than most people assume. Number 13. Butterflying thick chicken breasts flat before they ever get seasoned. A sharp knife run horizontally through the thickest breast pieces, opening them out flat like a book, evening out the thickness completely. Grandma Selma did this specifically for breast meat, never for thighs or drumsticks. A butterflied breast cooks through evenly in the same amount of time it takes the surface to reach perfect golden brown, which solves the single most common fried chicken failure, a beautifully dark crust hiding a pink underdone center on the thickest cuts. Number 12. Steeped, strong black tea used as part of the marinade liquid instead of straight buttermilk. Sweetened black tea brewed strong and cooled completely, mixed half and half with buttermilk for the overnight soak. Grandma Winnie in Baton Rouge kept a specific brand of tea bags just for this. Tannins in black tea have a tenderizing effect on meat similar to what you get from an acidic marinade, and the sugar in sweet tea contributes to deeper browning once the chicken hits hot oil. It's a soak with a subtle depth that plain buttermilk alone never quite reaches. Number 11. Massaging the marinade bag by hand for a full 60 seconds after sealing every single time. Not just tossing the bag in the fridge. A full minute of hands-on massaging through the sealed bag, working the marinade into every piece before it ever goes to rest. Grandma Dorothea treated this step as non-negotiable. Pressing the air out and actively working the liquid against the meat means full, even contact from the very first minute, rather than relying on gravity and time alone to distribute the marinade evenly across every piece. Number 10. A ground ginger addition to the dry seasoning blend, just a half teaspoon per cup of flour, barely enough to taste on its own, folded into the same bowl as the paprika, garlic, and pepper. Grandma Ida added this quietly and never explained why when asked. Ginger has a background warmth that doesn't read as gingery in the finished chicken, but it cuts through the richness of the fry in a way black pepper alone doesn't, leaving the overall bite feeling lighter rather than heavier as you work through the meal. Number 9. Potato starch swapped in for half the cornstarch in a cornstarch flour blend. Half cornstarch, half potato starch, mixed evenly into the seasoned flour rather than using cornstarch alone. Grandma Cassandra sourced a potato starch specifically from a Jewish deli near her house long before it was easy to find anywhere else. Potato starch has larger, different-shaped granules than cornstarch, and it produces a coating that shatters into distinct shards rather than the more uniform crackle cornstarch alone creates. 2 different starches, 2 different textures, 1 crust. Number 8. Loosely draping the resting fried chicken in plain brown paper instead of foil or nothing at all. A plain paper grocery bag, opened flat, draped loosely over the resting chicken, never sealed or wrapped tight. Grandma Nadine saved brown paper bags specifically for this purpose. Foil traps steam against the crust and softens it. Leaving chicken fully uncovered lets it cool too fast. Paper breathes, holding in just enough warmth to keep the chicken hot for serving while still letting excess steam escape freely, protecting the crunch far better than either extreme. Number 7. A pinch of salt dropped directly into the frying oil before the very first batch goes in, not seasoning the chicken more. Seasoning the oil itself, a small pinch stirred in and dissolved before the first piece ever touches it. Grandma Roberta did this at the very start of every frying session, never again after. Salt in the oil seasons the crust subtly from the outside as it fries, a background layer of flavor that works alongside, not instead of, the seasoning already in the flour and the meat itself. Number 6. Saved, crushed cracklings from a previous fry blended directly into the next batch's dry flour. The crispy bits that fall off in the oil and collect at the bottom strained out, cooled, and crushed into small crumbs, then mixed straight into the seasoned flour for the following week's chicken. Grandma Essie never let a single crumb of those bits go to waste. Those cracklings carry concentrated, already fried flavor and a genuinely crunchy texture that plain raw flour simply cannot replicate on its own, essentially seasoning the new batch with the flavor of the last one. Number 5. Letting cut. Raw chicken sit uncovered at room temperature for exactly 30 minutes before any marinade touches it. Not 30 minutes after marinating. 30 minutes before, on the counter uncovered, chicken pieces spread out on a tray. Grandma Vera insisted on this step before anything else began. Cold meat straight from the refrigerator has tightened muscle fibers that resist absorbing liquid quickly. 30 minutes at room temperature relaxes that tissue just enough that when the marinade finally goes on, it penetrates faster and more evenly from the very first minute of soaking. Number 4. Malt vinegar in place of the usual white or apple cider vinegar in the marinade. A straight 1-to-1 swap, same quantity, different bottle. Grandma Perline kept a bottle of malt vinegar specifically for chicken and nothing else in her kitchen. Malt vinegar carries a deeper, maltier, almost caramel-adjacent tang compared to the sharper, cleaner acidity of white or apple cider vinegar. The tenderizing effect on the meat is identical, but the flavor underneath the crust comes out noticeably richer and less one-note. Number 3. A 5-minute rest with dry seasoning alone before the chicken ever touches a drop of liquid marinade. Salt and dry spices rubbed directly onto bare chicken, left completely alone for 5 minutes, no liquid anywhere near it yet. Grandma Mabel treated this 5 minutes as sacred, timed, and never rushed. That short dry rest lets the salt begin drawing moisture to the surface through osmosis before the wet marinade arrives, meaning the wet brine that follows has an already primed surface to work with instead of starting from scratch, layering 2 tenderizing methods back to back instead of relying on just one. Number 2. A cold buttermilk soak that starts on the stovetop, warmed slightly first. Buttermilk brought to just barely warm, never hot. On the stove before the chicken goes in, rather than poured in cold straight from the refrigerator. Grandma Luella tested it against her wrist like a baby bottle every time. Slightly warmed buttermilk carries its acids and enzymes into the meat noticeably faster than cold buttermilk does, cutting real-time off an overnight soak without sacrificing any of the tenderizing effect, because the chemistry simply moves faster at a slightly higher starting temperature. Number 1. Layering the dry brine and the wet brine methods back-to-back in the same session instead of picking one. Dry salt rub first, rested alone, rinsed off, then straight into a full wet buttermilk soak overnight, no gap in between. Grandma Odessa never understood why anyone would choose one method when both could be run in sequence. Most cooks use either a dry brine or a wet marinade, treating them as competing techniques. Running both back-to-back means you get the deep, even seasoning that only a dry brine achieves, followed by the moisture and tang that only a wet soak provides, stacking 2 proven methods instead of settling for one. If you have a grandmother, a big mama, a nana, or a miss somebody from church who still fries chicken from memory, go stand next to her stove and watch her hands. Half of what's on this list, she's probably still doing without ever calling it a trick. Drop her name in the comments because she deserves to be remembered. See you next time.